Hello, my friend, and welcome back to another episode of Challenge Your Norm. My name is Pernella, and I am your friend on this podcast. And today, I felt like chatting with you about perfection versus getting started. Because I believe that you can read books all day on how to become a better public speaker, or books on self-development and how to become more loving towards yourself and others, or how to become a good cook. But unless you actually put these things into practice and actually start applying them to your life and the actions that you take on a daily basis, you won't grow in the same way. And I do believe that there is a lot of power to studying and really understanding certain things about a new area before jumping in and taking it into action. But I also think that most of us are good at staying within the studying part for so long that it actually hinders us from gaining the real knowledge and growth that we can only really get from doing the thing and practicing it into our daily lives. And I'm pretty sure you probably have something in your life that you want to do, or maybe you've been wanting to do for years, and because you feel like you wouldn't be good enough at it and it wouldn't be perfect, you've just been holding yourself back from getting started. Or maybe you did start and then you saw how much work there would be to actually get to the level that you wanted, and so you stopped, or you just kind of gave up. And I can totally relate to that. I am right there with you. And today I was hoping that with this conversation we could kind of hype each other up, because I kind of want to share some things that I've been going through when it comes to this podcast and other things in my life, and hopefully you can relate, because I just launched this podcast and my episodes, they just were not perfect. And I tried to start a podcast for 6 months, and I had this vision in my head of what I wanted it to look like. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself, because I would compare it to the podcasts that I listen to on a daily basis, which are the biggest and the best podcast in the entire world. And I mean, what a cruel comparison to do to myself, because those people who have created those podcasts, they've been practicing and doing this podcasting thing for years. And so here I am trying to start my first podcast episode, and I'm comparing myself to all these incredible individuals who also once started their first podcast, but I'm comparing myself to where they are today. What a cruel thing to do to myself. I have had to realize that, of course, my podcast is just not going to be on that level yet. Of course, I will certainly do my best, and I'll try to the best of my ability to make it as good as I can. But that really is all that I can do. And I can practice as much as I want, which I did. I mean, it did take me 6 months, and I made maybe 8 or 10 episodes in total where I was just kind of practicing and chatting. But at some point, I have to get it out there, because if I want to grow and get better at it, I have to go out into the deep water and just get started, so that I am forced to continue to practice and grow within it. And so could my first episodes have been better? 100% they could, but I eventually will get better, and I'd much rather get started today and do my best than strive for a perfection that may never come, especially not if I don't just jump in. And so some things that I reminded myself of when I was in this process of wanting to start this podcast, and how I came to finally make the episodes that actually came out. I made those within a few days. It was, once it clicked and I realized these things that I want to chat with you about now, it was as if everything just became so much easier, and it just allowed me to finally make the episodes that I felt I wanted to get out there, even with all their imperfections. And now I'm started, and then I can just keep growing and getting better. And the first thing that kind of clicked and that I got reminded of is that something that I have that nobody else would be able to bring to a podcast is my history. And it's me as a human, with all the experiences that I've gone through and the perspectives on things that I've been able to create throughout my life. And now no one else in the world has that, just like nobody in the world has the specific history and perspective and way of living life as you have. And I just feel like that's such an important reminder when we want to get started on something, that instead of comparing ourselves to these people who have created success within this area that we want to grow within, focusing on the gifts that we have within, and really maybe even writing down, what are your gifts and how can I utilize these to make this thing that I'm creating special to who I am as an individual, and really being aware of our strengths. And I wrote a full list of things that I have that I can just take use of. And also it allowed me, for me writing the list and for me reminding myself that I am the only person in the world that is me, the human that I am, it allowed me to just be myself and just speak from my heart. And it just, obviously when you just speak from your heart, it's so much easier than when you try to do something that maybe isn't even fully you. And in podcasting, yes, I can learn from these incredible people who've been doing it for years, but putting my twist on it is something that only I can do. And so I think that's pretty cool. So just ask yourself, if you've been comparing yourself to others and you wanted to start this new thing, how can you put your twist on it? And how can you utilize these qualities that only you have in order to make your thing feel authentic and good to you? Something else that I like to ask myself when I'm getting started on something new that may feel a little fearful or scary, or maybe something that I'm kind of lazy about getting started on, is, could this thing potentially help someone out there? Could this inspire someone, or maybe bring them into a better mood? Or could this thing teach them something new? And if the answer is yes, then how dare I not put it out? How dare I be so selfish to not share this thing with that person who could take benefit from it? How dare I think about that high school friend that may judge me for doing this? Who cares about my friend from high school? Yes, they may think of me and judge me for those 3 seconds that it shows up in their feed or whatever. But after those 3 seconds, they're going to move on with their own life. Is it worth for you to not get started just because you're afraid of that person judging you? I also just think that anyone who is out challenging themselves, anyone who's out there challenging their norm and wanting to grow and become a better human, they will support you. Anyone who is out there putting in their sweat and tears to change their life for the better, or help someone else change their life for the better, they will support you. Only people who have a more limiting mindset, who are staying stagnant and staying safe within what they're doing, may be the people who judge you. But also, you putting yourself out there, you doing the thing that feels authentic to you, you following that gut feeling of you wanting to get started on this something, may even end up inspiring that other person. And so you're only doing good for the world if you actually allow the fear and then just take the leap and get started anyway. Okay, the next thing I want to chat about is that I feel like a huge help whenever I want to get started on something new and I'm hard on myself for not being good enough yet, is that I write down the things that I need to improve on. So for me, I feel like writing it down helps me both obviously clarify what it is that I need to get better at so that I can make an effort to do so. But also I feel like writing it down, I realize, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. I feel like when I put things onto paper, it usually helps me see the critic in my mind likes to just stress out on things and exaggerate. And when I write it down, it just simplifies my thoughts and clarifies how I actually feel without the added stress and bomb of just fear or whatever it is that's going on in my mind. And so it really, writing it down motivates me to practice this thing that I need improvement within. And for example, I've always had this tendency to mumble and fumble in my words, and my sentences don't always come out the right way that I want them to, and they don't always come out in the way that I think of the sentences in my brain before they come out of my mouth. And so because I've been aware of this for a long time, and I know that the only way for me to get better at that is to practice, I know that I have to speak on my Instagram stories as much as possible, and on my YouTube as much as possible, and in this podcast, and just practicing, because the more I practice just speaking from my heart, just speaking out loud, the better I'll get at it, right? Like when we practice, we get better. Back in 2020, I set a goal for myself. I felt that this was a time where my mumbling and fumbling was just hindering me from doing the things that I wanted to do with all of my platforms and actually making a difference in people's lives. And so I set myself a challenge that every single day in 2020, I was going to do a story where I started just like speaking out my thoughts with the intention to help someone else. And so every day I would just say something that I had thought about, or something that I felt could motivate others to, do something that had helped me in my life. And I just started to share more stories and just every day do something with the intention of trying to help someone else. And from doing so, I felt that I improved so much with my public speaking. And that doesn't mean that not public speak, I guess you can say public speaking, but just like speaking to an audience, regardless of whether it's in front of a camera or it is in a public setting. And I feel like me doing that, I got more and more comfortable with it. And the only reason I started doing that was because I became aware. I wrote down, what is it that's holding me back from doing this thing, from getting started on this thing that I want to do? And that was my fear of mumbling in my sentences, my fear of getting judged from what I was saying, and just becoming aware of the fact that that is what was holding me back, and becoming aware of this fear that I had inside of me. I could choose to make a conscious effort to practice within that. So I just felt like sharing that in case you have not been getting started on the thing that you want to get started on because you feel like you're lacking something. Actually get clear on what it is that you feel like you're lacking. Get clear on the things that you want / need to improve on in order to get that goal of yours achieved. Get started on that thing. Because I think that awareness is always key to grow within anything, right? Without awareness, we cannot grow. So write down a list of the things that you feel like you need to grow upon in order to get that done. And maybe it's just one thing, and you getting clarity on that one thing, you can make a conscious effort in practicing and actually getting better at it. Okay, so I kind of want to jump in and talk about complaining real quick, and it may seem off topic, but I kind of think it's not within this perfection versus getting started subject. So just hear me out for a second, because I think we all have this friend who complains about something and maybe has been complaining about this thing for years and just never does anything about it. It's literally just complaining without action. And maybe it's about their partner or their work or their living situation. And we looking at it from the outside are like, just do something about it. And it's easy for us to see from the outside looking in at this friend. But I think that secretly, we all have something in our life that we too complain about. And I think it is important, again, to become aware of this. What is it actually that we are complaining about? Because if we can become aware of that, we can then choose to do something about it. Get started in doing something about it. And I think that oftentimes we don't do something about it because we are scared that what may come from doing something about it may not be perfect. It may be scary and unknown what is on the other side of that. My mom, she always said that either you do something about it or you stop complaining. And I just think that actually doing that can lead us towards so much freedom, and just getting started on either accepting the fact so that we stop complaining about it, or actually doing something about it and getting started on that and allowing ourselves to step into the unknown, step into the imperfection of that, will lead us towards something greater. I mean, in my life, every single time I've gone through a storm, every time I've gone into something that has been unknown, every time I have challenged my norm and gone into a storm, something greater has always come from doing so. I think as long as we listen to our intuition, our gut, those little voices that I spoke about on the other episodes, the little voices in our head that say that we should do something about it, something greater on the other side is always going to come from that, or that thing that we've been dreaming about may come from it. And on the previous episodes, I was talking about this inner voice and listening to those, but I think the inner voices are also maybe the inner voices that are complaining, because if we listen to those complaints, we then can take action on something new. We can challenge our norm and do something, step outside of the uncomfortable, step outside of the unknown, and just do the thing that our little our little intuition, our little voices want for us to do. And now I'm tying this back into the title of this podcast, Perfection versus Getting Started, is that I think that sometimes we don't want to listen to those complaints and actually get started on changing it because we're afraid it won't be perfect, because we can't actually control the outcome when we do that. But I don't think we really can control anything in life anyway. It's just our brain that wants to keep us safe at all times. So it's in our mind, makes it seem like we can control things, but really we cannot control anything. And so listening to those inner voices and just getting started, listening to those complaints and just getting started, I think is the right thing to do. For me, I feel like it's only when I try to strive for this perfect life or this perfect outcome that I hold myself stuck. And I'm done with doing that. I want to get started with anything and everything that I feel within that I should get started on. And I want to make mistakes and I want it to be imperfect. And I want to call myself out of my bullshit. And I just want to roll around in the dirt until I figure things out and get on the other side of the storm or the mess. And I'm hoping that you're with me on that and that you want to get started and just on the perfection. Like, I don't know why I just made a farting sound, but it's because I didn't want to swear on this podcast. But I just want for us all to stop feeling like we need to be perfect to get started, because only great things can come from us getting started and not from us staying stuck because we want it to be perfect. And you know this, you know the things we've talked about today, but sometimes we all just need a little reminder. I certainly do. So, it never hurts chatting about it more. And right now, I know certainly that from listening to this podcast, something in your mind, whether you have acknowledged it or not, but something in your mind has popped up that you know that you should get started on. And maybe you don't even allow yourself to be aware of what that thing is because you're so afraid, or you have put yourself inside of this box, this identity of what it is that you allow yourself to do and think and be and do, and what it is that you don't. So maybe it's popped up, but because you are so stubborn, I'm a stubborn person, so you're not alone if you're stubborn. You're so stubborn in your belief about yourself that you don't even allow yourself to think or to acknowledge that thought that pops up that is telling you to get started on something. So I think it's just as much a practice to allow ourselves to acknowledge those thoughts. And then, so many things in my life I've realized later on in life has popped up earlier, but because I was so stubborn and so stuck in my belief about myself, I didn't even acknowledge those thoughts because I just automatically was like, I could never do that. That's not who I am. Well, where would I start? I don't have the skills. I don't have the knowledge. I didn't grow up in this environment for me to become successful at this. And just all these self-made definitions of what I can and cannot do, that then later in life, when I've grown a little bit or become a little bit more self-aware, that I've then been able to tore down. And I'm sure right now I'm getting a ton of messages, gut intuition, feelings, voices in my head that are telling me certain things that maybe right now I'm not even aware and able to acknowledge, because that's just not where I am yet. But I think that we can practice both through meditation and journaling and listening to podcasts and reading books and practice listening to these little voices and thoughts. And the sooner we become aware of them, the sooner we can get started and let go of this wanting to be perfect. That was kind of what I wanted to chat about today. I kind of went on a little bit of a side note there at the end, but I hope it kind of made sense. And I hope that you found some use in this podcast. If you did, please share it with a friend or on social media. And it helps hosts a lot to subscribe to their podcast. I just figured that out since publishing it, that is something that helps me out a lot. If you want to do that, then it pops up every time I post a new episode, and I'd love to grow with you on this journey. I hope you go out and today reflect upon this thing that you've been wanting to get started on, and maybe make a list on what action steps you could start doing to actually get started on it and let go of this fear and feeling of needing to be perfect to get started. And then I also hope that you remember that to grow, you have to challenge your norm.